I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network, and this is a breaking news alert. One of Donald Trump's lawyers, who claims that she's not one of Donald Trump's lawyers in connection with the search warrant executed at Mar-A-Lago, spoke with federal investigators in Washington, D.C. about Donald Trump's conduct in connection with having top secret classified records and other government records at Mar-a-Lago as part of the Department of Justice's criminal investigation. I'm talking about Christina Bobb. Christina Bobb is the individual who signed a document on June 3rd affirming to the Department of Justice that all of the documents that were subject of a May grand jury subpoena that was sent to Donald Trump, that all of these records were turned over. Christina Bobb turned over to the Department of Justice a red weld that was sealed with this attestation. The attestation that was filed by Christina Bobb stated that it was, quote, based upon the information that has been provided to me, she certified that Trump had no more records that were responsive to the grand jury subpoena, which says turn over all of the government records you took and all of the classified records you took and all records that don't belong to you, which belong to the government. It's being reported that Christina Bobb insisted on that language, that it was based upon information that was provided to her, because Christina Bobb herself did not make any search whatsoever of the property. We are learning that during her meeting with federal investigators in Washington, D.C. last Friday, she stated that she was simply following the orders of another Trump lawyer, Evan Corcoran, and that Evan Corcoran, who was representing Trump in connection with the back and forth to the National Archives and the Department of Justice regarding turning over the classified records that Donald Trump stole and other government records stole, that Evan Corcoran told Christina Bobb to basically sign this attestation to the feds, to the Department of Justice, and she was uncomfortable doing that, to saying that she conducted the search. So she said, based upon the information that has been provided to me, and we are learning that that information was provided by Evan Corcoran. We're also learning that during her meeting with federal investigators in Washington, D.C. last Friday, she also talked about communications with another Trump lawyer, Boris Epstein, and Mr. Epstein was subject of a search warrant that was executed on him in the past month or so, and his telephone was turned over to the Department of Justice, and they're investigating his potential criminal conduct in connection with January 6th, and they're also apparently looking into his conduct as well in connection with the documents that Donald Trump stole at Mar-a-Lago. Now, the declaration that was signed by Christina Bobb is one of the main focal points regarding the obstruction of justice charge that the Department of Justice is investigating, because in her attestation regarding the documents all being turned over, which of course we know were false. The documents in the red weld and the documents turned over back in January were not the full and complete set of records. Indeed, in August 8th, when the search warrant was actually executed at Mar-a-Lago, the Department of Justice was able to very quickly locate an additional 100 other classified records and nearly 11,000 other documents, which are government records, which did not belong to Donald Trump. So clearly her declaration was not accurate, and her declaration, though, did state that a diligent search was made, and of course we know that that was also false, that a diligent search was made. Now, there are some people saying that here Christina Bobb could be potentially trying to get out of her own personal liability, because technically the diligent search, and upon what information was told to her, was actually told by Evan Corcoran. And then the next question becomes, obviously, is who was telling Evan Corcoran that all of the documents had been returned and had been furnished. And obviously, we believe that to be Donald Trump who was saying that. Also, as we know from our previous reporting, in connection with certain boxes that were turned over to the National Archives back in January of 2022, that initial 15 boxes, which Trump tried to say, look, I've turned it all over. You have all of the records, which we know, again, was completely false, that Donald Trump was actually the individual responsible for packing all of those records himself, that he was literally the person who went through records and cherry-picked what he wanted to show and what he didn't want to show. Alarmingly, from very, very credible reporting, we also have information that the records that were obtained on August 8th also include potential nuclear secrets, and at the Arizona fascist rally that Trump held over the weekend, he falsely and very dangerously accused the Department of Justice of planting records, which he said, what did they do? They planted records on how to build nuclear bombs at Mar-A-Lago. And of course, with Donald Trump, we know everything is projection. So there is a significant amount of concern as well that the records there are documents on the precise way and how to build nuclear weapons. Now, this is a big development here that you have Christina Bobb, who is intimately, at least familiar, not so much with the documents, because she obviously didn't search for them herself, but with the process by which false statements were transmitted to the Department of Justice, that she is speaking with federal investigators and, in essence, speaking against other Trump lawyers. So you have Trump lawyers who are basically talking to federal investigators about misconduct of other Trump lawyers, which is why I've always said that MAGA actually stands for Make Attorneys Get Attorneys. And I think we see that to be completely an apt description right here, with Christina Bobb saying that it was actually Evan Corcoran who had told her that all of the documents had been returned. She didn't believe that representation herself, nor did she actually conduct the diligent search. That's why she insisted on this language. But ultimately, the language that she used, nonetheless, was a material misrepresentation to the Department of Justice. It's why Christina Bobb has to have an outside counsel now representing her. MAGA, Make Attorneys Get Attorneys. Clearly, the Department of Justice is now going to be looking towards Evan Corcoran, who may have significant exposure for criminal liability. And the criminal liability exposure for Christina Bobb doesn't fade. Just the fact that she's cooperating perhaps shows a willingness for the Department of Justice to show some leniency on her, or to treat her as a witness, focusing on the overall obstruction here involving Donald Trump. And one of the peculiar things that we've talked about here on the MeidasTouch Network with Christina Bobb is she was out there following the August 8th search warrant executed at Mar-A-Lago, at least leading people to believe, based on her interviews with Laura Ingraham and other radical extremist television networks, that she was Donald Trump's lawyer in connection with these search warrant matters. But recently, she's been going to the fascist Trump rallies and acting as a news reporter. I wouldn't even say it's news, a propagandist, interviewing the people before the show. And it was actually during one of those interviews where her and another host, where she basically said, what are you talking about? I've never been his lawyer on this matter. I was simply the custodian of records on this matter. Sure, I may have been to court once or twice on this matter early on, and I may have told people that I was the lawyer, but I was not the lawyer. I was simply the custodian of records. Well, one, usually if you're a custodian of records and you are saying upon information and belief, or upon what's been told to me, a diligent search has been done, you actually make sure that a diligent search has been done. And number two, as a result of what you said publicly there, because there is no attorney-client relationship, we mentioned this on another video, Christina Bobb cannot assert that she is subject to an attorney-client privilege. Granted, the attorney-client privilege, who can assert it, actually rests with the client, not with the lawyer, but where the lawyer is saying, I've never been the attorney, for someone like Trump to say, oh, she was my lawyer, where the lawyer is saying, I was never the lawyer, is pretty good indication that there would not be attorney-client privilege. And here, Christina Bobb appears to be cooperating with the Department of Justice's investigation. And obviously here, seeing that the Department of Justice's investigation is ongoing, they are being very aggressive. And this is a big development, of course, in their investigation into Donald Trump's obstruction, violation of the Espionage Act, and concealment and mutilation of records. We will keep you updated with more information here on the MeidasTouch network as we learn more. But again, big news that one of Donald Trump's lawyers or former lawyers is pointing to other lawyers as making her sign false statements attesting to a diligent search which never took place. Ultimately, this being used to show that Donald Trump was the one who was obstructing this all, which carries with it a 20-year prison sentence. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button right now. We are on our way to 1 million subscribers. Thanks to you. And if you want to support independent media like this, one way you can help us grow, we don't have any outside investors. Check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. There are different exclusive benefit packages from you could become a producer of the MeidasTouch podcast. Your name will appear. Don't worry, you won't have to do any additional work. You get postcards from me and the other co-founder brothers of the MeidasTouch podcast, exclusive podcasts and more. Patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Until next time, I am Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch podcast.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.